All right, so now we're going to talk about guidelines. A guideline is also called a guide, and this is a section of hair that determines the length that the hair will be cut. So for example, if I first start my sections and I'm doing a basic blunt cut, I'm going to section off a piece of hair. I'm going to cut, let's say, 1 inch. That guideline is going to serve as how much hair was cut. So if I cut that 1 inch, it comes off, that's my guideline. The reason I have a guideline is I don't want to take another section of hair and then try to guess at how much 1 inch is. So all the hair should fall to that guideline, and you should cut no more or no less than that guideline. Guidelines are located either at the perimeter, which is the outer line, or the interior, which is called the inner or internal line of the cut. The guideline is usually the first section cut when creating a new shape. There are 2 types of guidelines in hair cutting: stationary and traveling. Stationary guideline, something is stationary, you don't move. It does not move. All other sections are combed to the stationary guideline and cut at the same angle or length. They are used in blunt, one-length haircuts or haircuts that use over direction to create a length or weight increase. A traveling guideline, also called a movable guideline, moves as the haircut progresses. Traveling guidelines are used when creating layers or graduated haircuts. The guideline travels with you as you work throughout the haircut. When you use a traveling guide, you take a small slice of the previous subsection and move it to the next position or subsection where it becomes your new guideline. So with a guideline, you're able to do different things. With a movable guideline, or what they would call a traveling guideline, you're able to do different textures. You can also combine them. Some haircuts are a combination of all of them. If you combine them, you're going to get various amounts of weight, so just keep that in mind. That may be a good thing if you blend it correctly. So look at some of the figures. They give you some examples of different types of layers, different types of haircuts, and they diagram them. Get in the habit of diagramming different haircuts with how you view the facial shape. So with the guidelines, they give you an example of over direction. A lot of people always wonder, what is that? You'll usually see that in graduated haircuts. The purpose of it is to create some weight, because sometimes you want some weight in hair, especially in hair that is either fashionable, or some people say with thin hair you want to build upon weight in certain areas. Over direction is best understood by comparing it to elevation, whereas elevation is simply the degree to which you lift a section away from the head. Over direction occurs when you comb the hair away from its natural falling position. Rather than straight up and out from the head, over direction is used mostly in graduated and layered haircuts, and where you want to create a length increase in the design. So for example, when you're working on a layered haircut and you want the hair to be longer toward the front, you can over direct sections to the stationary guideline at the back of the ear. So an example is when you're combing the hair like this. If the hair is growing like this, I'm going to pull it and over direct it. Over direction is something you'll learn when you're getting to work on your mannequin and getting used to it. It's kind of uncomfortable at first. So another part of this is client consultation. Part of the client consultation is you're going to get an idea of what the client wants. They'll show you a picture, you're going to analyze the picture, break it down, talk about what they like, what they don't like. Understanding their facial shape is also very important. So the book will give you the example that if a client wants something, you have to explain to them in technical terms, your face might not be able to support this haircut, and sometimes if you kind of mock it or pull the hair up in a certain area, that will give them an idea of what it looks like. With modern technology, there's a lot of apps you can try in different styles, and if you have something like that, that can give a client an idea of why the haircut may not be a good idea that they want. They also give you the suggestion that if you want to view a client's profile, pull the hair away from the face and up and away from the neck, and that will give you what you want to see, what do you want to emphasize, what do you want to draw attention away from. Also know that with the in this section of the facial shape, that hair will dry. On average hair, hair will dry 1/4 to 1/2 inch. In other words, you will need to cut wet hair 1/4 to 1/2 inch longer than desired length. If the hair is curly, it will shrink 1/2 inch to 2 inches, which is very shocking. So if you think you're cutting that hair at the proper length, like the haircut is, on really wavy or really curly hair, what happens is you cut the hair, oh, this is gonna be a nice bob. Well, guess what? When it dries, it does this. And now they have this bob that's like this short. Keep that in mind and always cut a little bit less. Typically students, I find they cut usually too short at first, which is fine. That's because you're learning. You're scared about cutting it too short. It's always easier to go back in there, practice it again, cut a little bit shorter, then take off too much, because you can't just glue the hair back on. I always joke and say on a mannequin, I'm like, because a lot of students will ask, well, do you think that it looks good? I'm like, well, your mannequin loves it. We always joke around. I'll say something like, oh, well, I hope they have money they can invest in extensions, meaning they cut too much off. We've all made mistakes on clients. I made my own fair share of mistakes with haircuts. So know that hair analysis, I'm not going to go over it again. That was chapter 11. Watch those videos because it talks about the growth patterns, texture, density, elasticity. All those are important to consider when you're getting a haircut. So you want to examine the hairline and growth patterns. Hairline is the hair that grows at the outermost perimeter along the face, around the ears and on the neck. So like my hairline's right here. On someone who has receding hair, it may be farther back. Someone with a widow's peak, it may have a V shape. Know that the growth pattern is the direction in which the hair grows from the scalp, and it's also referred to as the natural fall or natural falling position. Calyx whorls and other growth patterns affect where the hair ends up once it's dry. You may need to use less tension when cutting these areas to compensate for the hair being pushed up when it dries, especially in the nape, to avoid getting a hole around the ear in a one-length haircut. Another crucial area is the crown. They give you the example that there may be some wild things going up on in there. It may sound funny, but it's true. If someone has a prominent whorl and you're trying to cut, you have to be very careful when you're cutting it. If I over-direct it and I pull it down, I'm going to get hair that comes out like a turkey. Hair density is the number of individual hair strands on 1 square inch of the scalp. It is described as thin, medium, or thick. Hair texture is the thickness or diameter of one strand. So fine hair has a shorter diameter. Thick or coarse hair has a thicker diameter. A client may in fact have fine textured hair with a thick density, meaning that the individual hairs are fine, but there's a lot of those fine hairs everywhere. An example is a natural blonde who has very straight hair. That's an example of someone who has a lot of hair, thick hair, but it's very fine hair. Know that a client can have a coarse texture but thin density, meaning that the individual hairs are fatter but they're spread farther apart. Density and texture is important because the different hair types respond differently to the same types of cutting. They give you an example with 3 women that have different haircuts, and as you can see, these 3 women have different hair textures, but they have the same haircut and it looks different. The woman that has a uniformed layered haircut and fine hair looks a lot thinner than the lady that has the uniform layered haircut on medium or curly hair. The medium and curly hair will look a lot thicker. Know that coarse hair tends to stick out more, especially if it's cut too short. Fine hair, though, can be cut to very short lengths and it still lies flat. But if a client has fine textured hair and thin density, cutting it too short can result in the scalp showing through, especially in styling, and then it looks like they have worse thinning than they do. Know that wave pattern is the amount of movement in the hair strands, and it varies from client to client, as well as different areas of the head may have different areas of waves. There is completely straight hair, no wave, wavy hair, curly hair, extremely curly hair, and anything in between. So look at those examples they give you. They give you a little chart that tells you the texture of hair and the special conditions. So fine hair typically needs more weight. But if you have fine hair and it's thick, you need more texturizing and it's suitable for many haircuts. Fine thin hair is limp and needs weight. Fine medium hair is great for many cuts, especially blunt, low elevation, and razor cuts. Medium thin hair needs weight. Graduated shapes work well. Medium hair texture, medium density is great for most cuts. Hair can handle texturizing. Medium texture with thick density, many shapes are suitable. Texturizing is usually necessary though. Coarse hair texture that's thin maintains some weight. Razor cuts are not recommended because on hair that's curly, that can cause a lot of damage. Medium coarse texture and medium density are great for many shapes. Razor cut is appropriate if the hair is in good condition. Coarse hair that is thick, very short haircuts do not work because it will look really scary. Razors may frizz and expand the hair. Maintaining some length to weigh the hair down is important. So now that we talked about, how to analyze hair and all that, we're going to be talking about tools. So I'm going to talk about the tools. I'm going to come back and show you guys my tools that I use. So know that the most common tool that we talk about are scissors, although the correct term, if we want to sound professional, is shears. There's all kinds of tools, and it's important to get it from a reputable source, so like saloncentric.com, Sally Beauty Supply for professionals, Each scissors have their own brand, so you can go to the seller, go to your local trade shows if your school offers it, and invest in a good quality product. So haircutting shears, also known as shears or scissors, are mainly used to cut blunt or straight lines in the hair. They can be used to slide cut, point cut, or implement other texturizing techniques. You can also have texturizing shears. Texturizing shears, also called thinning shears. These are going to be used to remove bulk from the hair. They call them thinning shears, tapering shears, or notching shears. Notching shears may look a little bit funkier. They have thicker blades. Many types of thinning shears are used today with varying amounts of teeth and blades. A general rule is that the more teeth in the shear, the less hair is removed per cut. Notching shears are usually designed to remove more hair with larger teeth set further apart. Know that razors, also called straight razors or feathering blades, are mainly used when a softer effect on the ends of the hair is desired. Razors can be used to create an entire haircut, to thin out or texturize in certain areas. They come in different shapes and sizes, and with or without guards. Typically, the ones you're given in cosmetology school have a guard, just so you're safe. Clippers are going to be used when creating short haircuts, short tapers, fades, and flat tops. Clippers may be used without a guard to shave the head right to the scalp. I just caution you that if you use it without the guard and you're not careful, you can nick the scalp and cause permanent baldness that way. When cutting guards of various lengths, and for the clipper comb-over technique. Trimmers are a smaller version of clippers, and they're known as edgers. They are mainly used to remove excess or unwanted hair at the neckline and around the ears to create crisp outlines. Trimmers are generally used on men's haircuts and very short haircuts for women. Sectioning clips, they can come in duckbill clips, your regular biter clips, or be very thin and small. Sectioning clips come in a variety of shapes, styles, and sizes, and can be made of plastic or metal. In general, two types are used: jaw or butterfly clips and duckbill clips. Both come in large and small sizes. Wide tooth comb. This comb is mainly used to detangle hair after we shampoo. It's the fatter one that we use to get the hair knots out of the hair after we shampoo it. Tail comb is used mainly to section and divide the hair. Barber comb is mainly used for close-up tapers on the nape and the sides when using the scissor over comb technique. The narrow end of the comb allows the shears to get very close to the head. Styling or cutting comb, also referred to as all-purpose comb, is a tool that is used for most hair cutting procedures. It can be 6 to 8 inches long and has fine teeth at one end and wider teeth at the other. So now we're going to talk more about the shears. The shears are very common, and all of the professional shears are made up of steel. So there's 3 countries that are responsible for manufacturing the steel. This will be on your test: Japan, Germany, and the United States. So if you're going to import something from Germany, so you'll hear a brand say, oh, it's from Germany or Japan, it's going to be very expensive. Hikari shears that come from Japan are very expensive because you're importing it. You want to gauge the hardness of the metal of a shear because it will help you determine if this shear will have a good life. If the metal is too soft, the shear will not hold a sharp edge and will need to be sharpened more frequently. The gauge of how you measure the strength of shears is called the Rockwell hardness. Generally, a shear with the Rockwell hardness of at least 56 or 57 is ideal. A shear with a Rockwell hardness that is higher than 63 can make the shear too hard, too brittle to work with. The shear could even break if it's dropped. So if it's too weak, it's not good. If it's too hard, it's not good. There are many different grades of steel available on the market. The strength or hardness of the steel increases, so does the shear's ability to retain a sharp edge, which means less frequent sharpening and maintenance. You also can get 2 types of shears: forged or cast. Cast shears are made if you have a mold. If you ever done casting of your own, if you ever had braces or a retainer, they'll cast your teeth. They'll first get a mold of how your teeth look and they'll pour a solution in it that hardens. That will be the cast, and then they fit your retainer over that. That works in the same way. They're made by when you pull molten steel into a cast mold to take the position. Once the metal is cooled, it takes the shape of the mold. One disadvantage of the cast shear is that sometimes the casting process can create tiny pinhole bubbles that create holes or voids. If the shear is dropped, it could shatter. Also, if the cast shear is bent, it cannot be bent out in a shape with the result of breaking because the cast shears are often brittle. The benefit is that cast shears are less expensive to produce than forged shears, and they're usually less expensive. Typically, depending where you go to school for cosmetology, most of your public cosmetology schools, they use a pair of cast shears. On the other hand, a forged shear is made by the process of working the metal into a finished shape by hammering or pressing. If you've seen the show Forged in Fire, they beat that metal into where they want it. The metal is heated to temperatures between 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit and 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit, which expands the molecular structure of the steel so that when it is struck by a heavy object, the molecules move. After the hammering or pressing is completed, the metal is cooled in water, causing the molecules to compress. The process is repeated until the desired structure of metal is achieved, thus making metal much denser and harder than the metal that goes through the casting process. The benefit is that the forging process creates a more durable shear than the casting process. Forged shears are easier to repair if dropped or bent. With new technology in the manufacturing process, a forged shear is similar to a piece of cast shear, but is often of much higher quality and durability. Forged shears last significantly longer than cast shears. Some forged shears have a handle that are welded into the blades. These shears undergo the same forging process, but usually the blades are made with a harder and metal than the handles. The benefit of this construction is that the shears can be repaired and adjusted easily by a certified technician if they're dropped or become dull. Most companies that offer this also give you a discount or a stipend if you buy it from them, and then you'll send it to them, and then they'll sharpen it and they'll send it back to you for repairs or your maintenance. The downside is that you're going to pay more money for shears that are cast, or not cast, that are forged. Forged shears, because of the process of them, you're going to pay more money for that. Cast shears, because they're simply poured into a mold, you don't pay as much. So it's really up to what your budget will allow and what you're able to spend at that time. So you may invest in a cheaper cast shear, and then at some point, as you save up money, invest into your forged shears. So we're going to take a break here. So just watch this again, get an idea of how the difference in shears are. And then we're going to go in and get some painless anatomy of the parts of a shear, some basic shear maintenance, and then on how to purchase the shears. So we're going to talk a lot about shears, and then we're going to talk about how to properly hold them. And then we're going to see where we go from there.